The political, social, and economic landscape that we face in the United States is transforming at a terrifying speed. Small groups have monopolized resources, assets, and knowledge, and they have left the vast majority of us to suffer in ignorance the catastrophic consequences of their criminal mismanagement. The super rich have stolen from $5 to $10 trillion from you and me over just the last 5 months, in addition to what they looted before then. And just when we are starting to pull ourselves together to confront this criminal regime of Wall Street, we are confronted with the brutal murder of Mr. George Floyd, slowly tortured to death. And those images have been spread across the entire country. Such brutal killings by police happen every day. Increasingly, honest police are forced to quit the force. But this incident was practically created for television and broadcast so as to foment massive domestic conflict that will benefit the wealthy, who are terrified that the working people might come together in response to their looting of this nation and of our earth. The murder of Mr. George Floyd is the confluence of two horrific subterranean rivers that flow just beneath the surface of the United States. One is the river of hatred and contempt for those who are classified as alien, as inferior on the basis of their skin color or the habits that they have learned from their honored parents. The river of hatred has been exploited for hundreds of years to distract from economic exploitation. The Fusionist Party of the 1890s brought together black and white to fight for social justice. They were brutally suppressed, and segregation was the result, a scheme in which pathetic privilege were given to poor whites, and mindless racism was encouraged as part of a brutal divide and conquer strategy. The other terrible subterranean river is that of destruction for profit, the controlled demolition of the United States economy. There is a faction among the rich and the powerful who see an opportunity for profit in the unspeakable act of tearing the United States apart. They want us to fight each other and to be divided, so divided that we are incapable of coming together to demand a righteous, equitable, and transparent society. Those dark forces have spent enormous sums of money to create rifts, to pit one poor man against another. It is impossible to have a conversation on issues like climate change and vaccinations, about the role of government and of the military, about the power of banks and multinational corporations. Different parts of the population have been fed narratives that are so divergent as to make it impossible to agree on what is true and what is false. And too many of the establishment have signed a blasphemous contract with the devil to be silent about the massive lies in plain sight in order to be allowed to become famous and to live a comfortable life. The intentional confusion created by the media and by authorities around COVID-19 has been exasperated. The intentional confusion created by the media and by authorities around COVID-19 has exacerbated this trend. The intentional confusion created by the media and by authorities around COVID-19 has exacerbated this trend. The murder of George Floyd is the final stage of this plan. Citizens of the United States are confronted with a baited gambit, an impossible choice. Choice A, question the COVID-19 narrative, the plan for vaccinations, and be forced into alignment with isolationist and racist militias. Choice B, denounce brutal racism in the government and systematic efforts of the Trump administration to encourage racist acts, and find yourself aligned with Barack Obama, Elizabeth Warren, and a panoply of think left, live right, closet globalists. Who forced this choice upon us? That is my question to you. I condemn this brutal murder and demand justice, but I appeal to your native wisdom, your innate ability to rise to the occasion, just as Robert Kennedy did when he spoke on the night of Martin Luther King's assassination. Please, 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 do not be drawn into this trap set for you by the rich and the powerful. We must start by facing honestly the advanced moral decay in the fabric of our nation. Many, many poor people have been deprived of educations, have been misled by powerful forces to blame the other, whether it is black, Asian, or the rural white worker, rather than thinking. Many poor people have been deprived of educations and have been misled by powerful forces to blame the other, whether it is the black, the Asian, or the rural white worker, rather than thinking strategically about how we can all come together to fight against these dark forces. Most people I know have given up on trying to build bridges. The threat of violence from the White House is a clear sign that the age of bridge building is dead. And as violence is encouraged in the streets, the current political COVID-19 crisis encourages people to stay at home, to interact only with those of similar minds. Social media, like Facebook and Twitter, is promoted by the people who are supposed to be our moral leaders as an appropriate way to organize. But that social media and the news that we read is intentionally designed to make our thinking shallow, to render us foolish and divided. Until we start to make our own news, start organizing our own social media, we will be played for fools. If we cannot create a positive trend in America that gives hope for progress to the people, all people, if all that people can see is collapse and conflict, then the powerful can go forward with their plans to keep us from meeting each other, from being able to send mail to each other, from traveling, from communicating effectively via email or via social media. Google will never tell you that you are effectively living in a prison. The forces thrown against us by corporations, by investment banks, and the various anti-immigrant and anti-minority groups that prop up behind the forces thrown against us by corporations, by investment banks, and the various anti-immigrant, anti-minority groups that they prop up from behind the curtain are warping the bearing walls of our nation. Those forces want to make attacks on minorities as acceptable again as they were in the 1920s. They want you to ignore the looting of the government by banks and to obsess with the looting in the streets that is replayed over and over again in that disgusting media we are forced to rely on. We need a plan for what we're going to do, and we need to follow that plan. We do not need politicians who tell us things are bad, but are afraid to explain to us why they are bad. We do not have time for vague hopes that things will get magic. We need a plan for what we are going to do, and we need to follow that plan. We do not need politicians who tell us that things are bad, but are afraid to explain to us why they are bad. We do not have time for vague hopes that things will get better by magic. We most certainly should not think that replacing the brutal, brash, narcissistic Donald Trump with some other corrupt politician will solve our problems. What we need is a new politics of habit, of thinking, and of action that is neither conservative nor progressive, but is of itself transformative. We need a politics that addresses root causes, not their grotesque consequences. We must grieve for George Floyd, for his family, his friends, and his people. At the same time, we must see through the ruse to understand how this incident was rigged up as a chance to use race as a means to tear our country apart and to promote conflicts that will be used as an excuse for martial law. Donald Trump sent out a Twitter, a cynical for-profit corporation that squeezes billions of dollars out of us, in which he said, when the looting starts, shooting starts. Supposedly, Twitter blocked this message because it was offensive. I doubt this story. Rather, these media companies are working overtime to manipulate us, trying to make us think that they are objective, that they are our friends, through false images and deceptive rituals. The violence of police cannot be separated from the horrific foreign wars we are engaged in now. Police are often soldiers who have returned from those wars traumatized. The violence that they practice is incubated in violent video games, in movies, and in a militarized value system. The violence has swept our entire society. As the writer James Baldwin once wrote, those who have The writer James Baldwin once wrote of those who have been trained to see the world in terms of race. They are, in effect, still trapped in a history that they do not understand, and until they understand it, they cannot be released from it. They have had to believe for many years, and for innumerable reasons, that the black men are inferior to white men. Many of them, indeed, know better, but as you will discover, people find it very difficult to act on what they know. To act is to be committed, and to be committed is to be in danger. In this case, the danger in the minds of most white Americans is the loss of identity. The black man has functioned as in the white man's world as a fixed star, as an immovable pillar. And as he moves out of his place, heaven and earth are shaken to their foundations. And if the word integration means anything, this is what it means, that we, with love, shall force our brothers to see themselves as they are, to cease fleeing reality and begin to change it. For this is your home, my friend. Do not be driven from it. Great men have done great things here and will again. We can make America what America can become. Baldwin was talking frankly about what it takes to make America great. Not great again, but great for the first time. What do we do now? The ancient art of aikido offers a strategy for the resolution of the social and political crisis bordering on a hybrid war that we face today. But it demands, aikido, that we first engage in a thoughtful, philosophical consideration of the larger dynamics in our nation that have brought us here. Although the aikido approach may not appeal to those who wish to indulge their emotions, it is the most effective response to what easily could become a catastrophe for the entire world. Conflict in the United States cannot be separated from the conflicts around the world. The violence used in our streets was learned from our numerous foreign wars. What happened there, hidden from the sights of citizens, has changed who we are. And now, if things fracture, the question of who controls nuclear weapons could become a crisis tomorrow. Aikido shows us how we can avoid an emotional response to the images we are fed by the corrupt media in an attempt to get us mad. And we can rather focus on building up our own communities and our own brave organizations so that we can stand up to the powers behind what we see on TV. Aikido teaches us that we should not respond to the blow thrown at us with an equally powerful blow against our opponent, but rather we should redirect the energy of the blow thrown against us in a harmless direction, or even in a positive one. A hostile attack must be disarmed by subtly redirecting the very energy that is thrown against us. The larger significance of these words is that there is a balance in the universe that we must tap into, and that the only way that we can truly solve problems is precisely through such a redirection of energy. Political history shows the truth clearly. Efforts to oppose terrible wrongs have often led to the overuse of force and created new problems, sometimes worse than the original ones. The sad process is similar in every age, and such an overreaction is precisely what the dark forces in the United States are hoping for, planning for. And yet, we cannot expect the people to suffer terrible injustice in silence. As the American patriot Thomas Paine wrote, "Moderation in temper is always a virtue, but moderation in principle is always a vice." What would an aikido master say if he was giving us advice about what to do to rebuild our country after this horrific spiritual damage, and how to respond to the terrible blows that have been thrown at us? Where would he suggest we should start to heal the commercialized, commodified, fragmented, frightened, and defiled and demoralized country? The terrible What would an aikido master say if he was giving us advice about how to rebuild this country after the terrible spiritual damage that it has suffered? And how would he respond to the terrible blows thrown at us by hidden forces? What would he suggest we should do to start to heal this commercialized, commodified, fragmented, frightened, defiled, and demoralized country. The terrible racial conflicts that are being encouraged by the corrupt media and by banks like BlackRock and Goldman Sachs are intended to make people on both sides go too far, to create lasting conflicts that distract attention away from the looting of this country, not by poorly paid workers, but by banks and from those who profit from such disasters. We can see immediately the negative impact of this blow, but if we use our imaginations and if we are disciplined, we can redirect that energy. People have been awoken out of their slumber. This is good. People have been made aware of the deep injustice that People have been awoken out of their slumber. This is good. People have been made aware of the deep injustice that they previously pretended did not exist. This is good. They have come together in the streets, sometimes working together, sometimes in confrontation. This is good. The intention of those who promoted images of destruction and chaos intended for different groups with different messages was to encourage horrific conflict. This is bad. But if we are able to pursue the truth, not sensationalized reports, and if we are able to make use of this awakening to get people involved in real conversations with each other, and even with people whom they're supposed to hate, then the forces unleashed to tear us apart can be redirected to bring us together. We can also start a deep conversation between citizens gathering at home in our neighborhoods to talk about what the real history of America is. We can ask ourselves questions that demand answers. When did things go wrong in America? Did everything go wrong after Donald Trump was elected? Or did Donald Trump play some positive role in that he spoke the truth about the endless wars and the corruption in our country? Or did the problem start with the deep corruption of the late Clinton administration and then the George W. Bush administration? Or should we trace the sickness back to the assassination of John F. Kennedy? Or should the evils in our country be traced back to colonization by Europeans in the 17th century and the extractive economy and slave economy that they imported? Or is there something fundamentally depraved about humanity that goes all the way back to Adam and Eve? These are critical questions to ask about America, and the answers are not simple. The current wave of disruption across our country must be redirected to energize people and to get them engaged in a constructive discussion, a hard discussion. That discussion could lead to transformation at the deepest level rather than the propagation of painful conflicts set up by the media and their corporate backers. The politicians we see on television are expert at dividing us. That is all these politicians know how to do. But we could have a politics dedicated to unity, to the transformation of thinking, and to honest perception and discussion. Not all Americans have an equal role in transforming the negative powers that have been unleashed in our country. Some of us have received educations and specialized knowledge that allow us to understand the world in ways that others cannot. We, as intellectuals, have an obligation to help those around us to perceive the world more clearly, to make sure that we are not abused by the powerful. At the same time, we intellectuals, have much to learn from those who have worked at hard jobs, standing all day at restaurants, living in inadequate housing, suffering terrible abuse. We can start to create a positive cycle by working together with those who have first-hand knowledge of the hardships in our society, but who do not have the specialized knowledge needed to change institutions. Such an alliance between workers and intellectuals will redirect the forces of exploitation in a positive direction. But such a redirection requires of us, those who have benefited the most, people like myself, a willingness for sacrifice. I was told the other day that I needed a political advisor, consultant. I responded that my political consultant is a woman who works all day at Walmart and goes home trying to feed her children in exhaustion. My political consultant is the man who cleans the basements of our office buildings in spite of the terrible pains in his back from his wounds from Iraq. These are my political consultants. Let us consider the quote attributed to Winston Churchill, "Never waste a good crisis." The expression is often used in a negative sense, meaning that a crisis is a chance to force through changes that would be resisted by the public in normal case system. Consider the quote attributed to Winston Churchill, "Never waste a good crisis." The expression is used in the negative sense, meaning that a crisis is a chance to force through changes that would be resisted by the public normally. The passage of the Patriot Act in the United States after 9/11 is a perfect example. A radical restriction of liberty that could never have been achieved without a manufactured mood of crisis. The crisis today is being magnified and distorted as a means to fundamentally alter American society. The intention is to block all opposition to the concentration of wealth, to the destruction of the environment, and to decrease the autonomy and the liberty of citizens. If we observe carefully, however, we notice that there are unexpected positive changes generated by these negative practices. If we can seize on these positives, we can push for a constructive transformation. We have no choice, as the forces have already been unleashed. For example, suddenly, without any form of participatory process or even consultation with experts, global travel has been severely restricted, and trade as well. Airlines are in bankruptcy, and airports have been shut down, and ports are quiet. But although politics, in this case, hobbles towards tyranny, the use of petroleum for transportation, and the runaway consumption society that has taken over, killing our ecosystem, but although politics, in this case, hobbles towards tyranny, the use of petroleum for the transportation But although politics, in this case, hobbles towards tyranny, the use of petroleum for transportation, and the runaway consumption society that has taken over are killing our ecosystem, it was precisely the right time to shut down the globalization machine, and this disruption could be an extremely positive move if we have the vision to recreate our society. Air transit has to end. Frivolous travel has to stop. The lockdown orders that have kept us at home, that have destroyed small businesses and empowered corporations, that have allowed the super rich to make billions and have driven most of us into poverty, are a negative force. But again, staying at home and working together with our family can be healthy if the direction is healthy. If we must stay in our neighborhoods, it could be an opportunity to build communities that are strong enough to stand up against the power of the rich. We could use this opportunity to know our neighbors and to learn how we can work together with them. Teaching courses online could reduce the need for automobiles and even allow for innovative connections between students and teachers in our country and around the world that could promote an international perspective. But today, online education is being pushed primarily by those in search of rapid profits. We must seize control of online education and change its direction. I make these suggestions here just as that, suggestions. We will need to work together to redirect, to block the dangerous forces that have been unleashed. But I would like to suggest that as we mourn the deaths, as we lament the destruction and the damage to our society, that we keep our eyes open to innovative and creative ways in which these negative forces can be redirected so as to achieve a fundamental transformation. Such a transformation was, to be honest, way overdue. The aikido of politics and policy that I suggest here is complex and subtle. Most politicians would not dare to approach you with such a policy proposal. They would assume that messages must be dumbed down for an American audience that cannot concentrate, that is made foolish by social media and by commercial content. But I take you seriously, fellow Americans. I will never talk down to you. I assume that you, standing behind the counter at Walmart, taking orders at Amazon, you wiping down the tables at McDonald's late at night, are entirely capable of understanding complex issues, and that you can arise to the occasion. You will shake off this poisonous consumer culture and move forward in this struggle. As we move forward, let us recall the vision put forth by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in his State of the Union address of January 6, 1941, as a challenge to fascism and to the conflicts that parallel our own. Roosevelt called for the protection of 4 freedoms for all citizens: freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. Roosevelt was not ambiguous about the significance of those 4 freedoms. He declared, I quote, "In the future days, we will make," he declared, "in the future days, we will seek to make secure, we will look forward to a world founded upon 4 essential human freedoms. The first is freedom of speech and expression, everywhere in the world. The second is freedom of every person to worship God in his own way, everywhere in the world. The third is freedom from want, which translated into the world terms means economic understandings that will secure for every nation a healthy, peacetime life for its inhabitants, everywhere in the world. The fourth is freedom from fear, which is translated in world terms means the fourth is freedom from fear, which translated into world terms means a worldwide. The fourth is freedom from fear, which translated into worldwide terms means a worldwide reduction of armaments to such a point and in such a thorough fashion that no nation will be in a position to commit an act of physical aggression against any neighbor anywhere in the world. Achieving such a vision will require tremendous energy and focus. It will require us to come out into the streets and to work with our neighbors to create a just and a fair society. We have been given such an opportunity, by accident perhaps. Now is our time to seize it and to push forward in a righteous direction. Thank you for your valuable time.